this is going to be a rambling me talking into the camera video, but I did stretch to turning a light on and using a tripod, so production values. My workplace is a communications company, which isn't a real industry. We don't produce or make anything. We don't provide an essential service. If we disappeared, most people wouldn't notice. There wouldn't be some shortage that would need to be urgently filled by the government. It's not an industry, as you might understand it. But it is a thing. It exists because companies want it to exist. They want professionals who will tell them how to communicate with their customers or how to communicate with politicians that they want to influence. We call it communicating because that's what it is, but also as a sort of vague, non-threatening way of putting it. In the same way that lobbyists don't call themselves lobbyists, even if most of what they do is lobbying. And also, communications is a way of selling it, in that saying I am a communications professional implies that I have a set of skills that people or companies or organizations need to pay for. As opposed to the truth is, I'm a dude with a laptop and an email account, and I can Google things and look things up on Wikipedia and look things up on the Scottish Parliament website. But I'm not a magician. I don't know everything. I don't have anything that you couldn't employ someone to do in-house instead of paying a company to do it for you. But the industry and the companies in it sell this idea of communications, this idea of expertise, because that justifies the existence of the companies and the industry, and the wheel turns on its axis. But what we do, as well as selling that story to people, is we teach people how to tell stories. Sometimes they're telling stories to the public about what kind of company they are, about how environmentally friendly or responsible they are. And sometimes we're helping companies tell stories to people who can influence things, about how essential they are, about how badly they need support, or how important the thing that they do is to society, and how it would be important if it got more funding or attention, or etc. etc. We are telling stories to people. Telling stories is not an idea that it is easy to say is an industry. Unless you're an author or an actor or a writer or a creative of some kind. But it's what we do. It's what everyone does. It's what all advertising is. Telling stories to you to persuade you to purchase a thing. And often advertising isn't even trying to sell you something. A lot of advertising is just creating awareness of a product or service. They're telling you a story about who or what the thing is. The idea of influencers is a terrible and modern phenomenon where people commodify themselves effectively. They become businesses rather than people. And they do storytelling, multimedia, multi-platform storytelling, about what kind of person they are, why they deserve your attention, and oh, by the way, this podcast was brought to you by... I call it storytelling because that's what it is. But I also call it storytelling because it's a good way of thinking about it, I think. To think that the pieces of media that you consume and the pieces of media you don't intend on consuming, but end up consuming anyway, like advertising, every promoted tweet, every Google ad, every Facebook ad, are trying to tell stories. And they are the product of professionals who work hard at telling you those stories, making those stories appeal to you as a person. And this is, of course, true of politicians as well. The most effective politicians, the ones who accrue the most power, are the ones who tell the most convincing stories. They tell you about who their party is and who their country is and who they personally are in a way that makes you believe in them. But obviously, like everything else, those messages are determined by teams of professionals. Dozens, hundreds of people work on those things. I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that there is an industry of people who work entirely on trying to sell you things and get you to behave in certain ways. And they use storytelling as their way of doing it. It's important to be aware of that. But it's also important to be aware that the stories we tell ourselves and tell each other are powerful. And they can spur action. And they can help us be better people, and they can help us do better things and be better to one another. And we should recognize that. And we should think about that more than we do. If you want to read a story that I wrote, which isn't important, it's about football and Northern Ireland because they're the only two things that I know anything about. I've been writing a blog, not about the European Football Championships that are happening, but about the European Football Championships that could have happened if a couple of things had gone differently. A link to that is in the description. You might not like it. You don't have to like it. It's just a story I've spent some time writing and thinking about because I wanted some escapism. I think we all want some escapism. I hope you can find yours. And I hope the stories that you read and experience are good ones. Thanks for watching. DFTBA.